So I want to address something that I've been getting some emails about and some social media about, and I have no problems bringing these things up when I'm wrong. A few weeks ago, we had a topic of conversation where I said that major conference realignment is dead. It's there on our YouTube page. Right. It's right. It's right there. It's one of the things that I broke out. And at that time, when we had that discussion, I believed what I said. I wasn't just saying that to say it. I was kind of looking at where the market was, seeing how television is playing out. And I thought to myself, there's really going to be no major conference realignment because everybody's settled for the time being. And more importantly, money is starting to dry up at a variety of places, including the tech companies who are sick and tired of incinerating cash for nobody to watch Apple TV shows, or Disney Plus, which has just lit money on fire, only to start taking stuff off their service because they don't want to pay the royalties, the residuals, everything else. I mean, the whole reason why you got a writer's strike and an actor's strike, Joe, is because these companies are really trying to overcorrect for all their spending. So I got it wrong. Colorado set things up for where we are today. But I was wrong. But while I was wrong about major conference realignment being dead, I was right about the reasons. And in a weird sort of ironic way, the reasons I felt that conference realignment wasn't going to happen because of television money ended up being the reason why we found ourselves in this position. The Pac-12 died not because the Big Ten was being a raider, all right? The Pac-12 died not because the Big 12 decided they were going to be a little bit aggressive. The Pac-12's death is related to being on the wrong end of two trends at the worst possible time. You'll remember that Larry Scott was the commissioner of the Pac-12, and he was this crazy guy. Wes Durham always called him the madman of college football because he was going to disrupt everything. The ACC was getting banged on the head because they were committed to ESPN and Disney. The whole argument around the ACC network was, well, let's do it with people who know how to get cable channels out there. Let's do it with people who have leverage, negotiating power to get the ACC network on as many systems as possible. And, you know, what they ended up giving up was this grant of rights that goes to 2036. And in a weird, ironic way, while they're not getting the most amount of money, that grant of rights is the only thing keeping this freaking thing together for the next 5 years or so, right? The Pac-12 went in the opposite way. They were looking at all the money that the Big Ten was making off their own network. They were seeing where things were going with the SEC. And Larry Scott, in his infinite wisdom, decided, I'm going to bet on ourselves, and we're going to do our own cable channel. Unfortunately, that's when things started their decline. And the Pac-12 had a really, really hard time trying to negotiate their availability on a variety of systems, to the point where in major markets with major Pac-12 teams, you couldn't get the Pac-12 network. So that's where they missed number one. That was the big bet that they missed on. You've never experienced that, right, Joe?
No.
Never experienced a big bet that you just didn't cash. Never. It's never happened for you. So here comes George Kliavkoff, right? The new commissioner. And he also ended up making a big bet that did not land. And that was, well, look at all these tech companies. Look at all the money they have. Look at all the ways they're investing in content. They're trying to get subscribers. That's where we're going to cash in. Turns out that Apple, looking at their bottom line, goes, ooh, I don't know about that. And has, you know, they gave them this weird incentive-laden streaming deal, which Pac-12 teams did not like. And that's where you had the disintegration. But if you want to understand how badly the Pac-12 missed, here is Larry Scott, the former commissioner of the Pac-12, this was in 2018 at a Pac-12 media day. And this video was pulled back up by Trey Wallace on Twitter. Here, listen closely.
Sports, to see the consolidation happening in the industry where ESPN and Disney are going to have more resources to buy sports rights, that Fox is going to have more resources to buy sports rights, that Turner, now that it's owned by AT&T, is going to have more resources.
Pause right there. Turner, owned by AT&T. How's that played out?
To provide sports rights. Couldn't be more delighted with where we are strategically and the fact that, you know, we're the only conference in the country that come 2024 is going to have all our rights back, complete control, and we're going to be able to adapt and react and take advantage of this new world media order that's coming in a way others can't.
Whoops. Again, that was 2018, Larry Scott talking about where things were going to be in 2024. He bet wrong. Here's where we are. And now we have further consolidation in the Pac-12, which gets us to another thing that I was wrong about. And that is FSU's desire to leave the ACC. And this gets us to the report that they're looking at private equity from JP Morgan to try to find a way out to buy their way out of the ACC. Now, important context here. Florida State is one of the athletic departments in the country that's actually run like independently from the university. They did this a few years ago. So what they're doing is only an extension of that. But again, these are things I don't think about. And where I was wrong is the desire of a school to actually sell itself out to groups like private equity groups that are notorious for really running businesses into the ground. But they've got money. So therefore, that's what's motivating this desire to get with, I don't know, at this point, why not just call them FSU PIF? I mean, what's to stop them from getting Saudi investment money to do what they want to do? Because that's where we're headed with this.
It also seemed like there was at least the idea of the endowment being cracked into to pay out the exit.
I thought that was interesting too.
I mean, again, things we learned during the pandemic. The football team, the men's basketball team, they're the ones who kept the lights on at these schools. And that's not an exaggeration, because once people started to realize, no, wait a second, you mean I could just take this class online and graduate and get a job? So as someone who just took out a $20,000 loan to pay for their first years of college, like, and then I have to pay back 70 grand on a $20,000 loan. Yeah. Like, oh, wait a sec, James. How about you just take that class online, sir? How about you knock out a few credits in the summer over at Wake Tech, right? Because but you want your child to have the experience. You want your student to have the experience of going to college, because you learn things. Well, if it's a pandemic and nothing's going on, right? We learn what we can live without. Things I've learned in 25 years in the media, the last 25 years in the media business. Yeah. The second you figure out you can live without that, guess what ain't coming back? Okay. So that's what kind of annoys me about these colleges. Like I said, that they had the wrong enlightenment during the pandemic. Their enlightenment was, let's squeeze more money out of these two sports while we can. Yeah. Instead of, how do we make this more equitable? How do we make this more efficient? How do we make this more fair? How do we make this the true experience that people like Jim Phillips and Kevin White and Nina King and Boo Corrigan, how do we make this a true experience that they talk about, and the opportunity? And I don't see that being prioritized. And I understand why it isn't, but I do think there's ways around this. There's ways to improve this. And no one wants to have the hard conversation. They went and just hired a former governor of Massachusetts to run the NCAA, to specifically politic Congress, to specifically get basically an exemption for calling the athletes what they are, which is employees. So instead of thinking forward, they're absolutely hustling backwards. And quite frankly, it's infuriating.
It is infuriating because these are supposed to be the adults in the room. To your point about
what they're even adults, it's what did Brett Kavanaugh say? Like, that's the part that irks me more than anything else.
Yeah. Here's the thing. When I say the adults ruin everything, it really is indicative of how we get to where we are, right?
Yes.
In that, over the history of time, people are not looking at spreading the wealth. People are not looking at saying, hey, this has worked for this. Let's make it work for everybody. I mean, look at the NCAA when it comes to women's college sports rights. They were sitting on something that was incredibly marketable, but because they didn't want the audacity of sharing the hashtag March Madness with the women, they felt like, well, no. This is our pie. We can't spread that out. That's the history of sports, for heaven's sake. So to see it extend this way does not surprise. I can sit here and make fun of Jimbo Fisher because he had a press conference yesterday and Tex Ags ended up kind of aggregating it. And he said, Jimbo Fisher on conference realignment, unfortunately, we're in a time now that everybody is fighting over the dollar, as though this is a unique time in history. This has been going on for decades. And heck, Jimbo Fisher is an example of a guy who's constantly chasing the money, because look at the contract he has with Texas A&M. But I can sit here and make fun of Jimbo Fisher. There are coaches who are at least being outspoken about the fact that all these decisions do not take the athletes into consideration. We brought up the Rick Pitino tweet, right? Rick Pitino talking about, man, why don't we just regionalize everything else? It's all football driven. Because as a basketball coach, he's thinking, and he's living the life now in the Big East that gets it. You ask the question, who would you rather be, Stanford or Washington? I'm in agreement with you that given the way things are going, I'd rather be Stanford. Let's blow it up even bigger. If you're the ACC and you had to do it all over again, would you rather be the Big East now, who you took teams from and sent them on a path to where they are today, which is a like-minded conference of basketball playing schools that has a nice media deal. Everybody gets what everybody else is trying to do, and it creates an environment that you want to be a part of. There's a reason why the Big East tournament is 10 times better in terms of energy than the ACC tournament now. When it used to be flipped, take the Garden out of it, all right? Just strip the Garden out of it. Those are like-minded schools that want to beat each other in that particular
that you were familiar with.
That you're familiar with. So if you had to do it over again, if you went back 20 years, what's better peace of mind? Sure, you could be making all the money, but what did the famous philosopher P. Diddy ever tell us? Mo money, mo problems. So here we are in the ACC with all these problems. Florida State can't get enough money. North Carolina, according to Luke DeCock on Friday, like having to have conference calls saying we're not leaving the ACC because Bubba Cunningham has to tell all their employees, guys, we're not leaving. We're just not leaving right now. And that's causing all sorts of other stress. Imagine an ACC that's like the Big East. Who would you rather be? Sure, honestly.
Yeah.
5 years ago, I might have told you I'd still rather be the ACC. But given how things are shaking out, I'd rather be the Big East now.
You're asking the existential question, which is how can you convince yourself to be happy with what you have?
We're trying to do that now, Joe.
Instead of striving for all of the wrong reasons, right? But then you say, well, how do you sustain that? How does one sustain? The Big East it's a little bit easier because they don't have footballs. They don't have football.
But football causes problems.
Right.
So when you strip yourself out of that, you see how happy they are?
Right.
So that's what I'm getting at.
By the way.
Yes, they have been successful.
UConn in that tournament.
You say maybe it's not money that's the root of all problems. It's football that's ultimately the root of all problems when it comes to college sports, which gets us to, if you really wanted to save college athletics, you're going to have to break football out completely. That's how you have to do it. So here's Eli Drinkwitz, our buddy Eli, who had a press conference as the Missouri head coach, and he was asked about all the things that are going on right now in college athletics. Here's what he had to say.
All right, I'm going to say it. I thought the transfer window, I thought the portal was closed. That's just for the student athletes. The adults in the room get to do whatever they want, apparently. And it's, it's just sad that there's, my question is, did we count the cost? I'm not talking about a financial cost. I'm talking about, did we count the cost for the student athletes involved in this decision? What cost is it to those student athletes? We're talking about a football decision. They based off football, but what about softball and baseball who have to travel cross country? Do we ask about the cost to them? Do we know what the number one indicator of symptom of or cause of mental health is? It's lack of rest and sleep. Traveling in those baseball, softball games, those people, they travel commercial. They get done playing at 4. They got to go to the airport. They come back. It's 3 or 4 in the morning. They got to go to class. I mean, did we ask any of them? Are we going to look back? I don't worry at all about the game. The game is going to be strong. Football is going to be fine. We'll all figure it out. But did we consider the people that we are entrusted with? Did we consider the student athlete?
So that's Eli Drinkwitz, Missouri head coach. And it's easy, and I'm guilty of this from time to time, looking at a well-compensated college football coach talking about leaving for better situations and doing it for money. I mean, Eli Drinkwitz is the same guy who went from offensive coordinator at NC State, took a prime opportunity at App State, was there for a year. Basically, the success was built off the previous coaching staff, and then parlayed that into a job at Missouri, which, what did Missouri do? Missouri bettered their situation, chasing the cash, joining the SEC. Well, Eli Drinkwitz eventually wanted to be a SEC coach. Well, that's where the two paths collided, and here we are. But I can point that out, but it doesn't take away from what Eli Drinkwitz is getting at. And if the college coaches understand this, I am curious if those in power at these schools end up pushing towards this Super League. But the question is, again, if you're Missouri, do you make that Super League? If you are Washington and Oregon that just joined the Big Ten as a life raft, do you make it? If you're a Big Ten president who just signed off on getting these two teams at a discount rate, let's say I'm the president of Indiana or I'm the president of Illinois, do I believe that I'm going to make that next round to a Super League? So we can sit here and say, yes, this is where things are going. But I really doubt the anti-American sentiment of relegation and promotion is going to trickle its way down to college football. Once they go Super League, you're never getting that money back. Maybe you'll be happier, though. That's the thing. Maybe that's the thing.
I applaud his comments.
Yeah.
And, look, I think they're making a mistake in the sense that it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Mhm.
That's the part where I rue that there's no imagination here.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, and this is where the leadership of Mark Emmert, the lack of leadership from Mark Emmert, and just saying to the presidents, "Oh yeah, let's just get more money. Let's just keep doing this." That's, to me, that's who failed. That is who failed here.
Yes.
People like Randy Woodson, who voted for Mark Emmert on a governor's board for the NCAA. They are the ones who have failed here, because there was a complete and total lack of leadership at the national level. That's on football. That's in men's basketball. That's all of these other sports. Like, did we think of the cost? Did we think of the other athletes? No. Drink, because they don't have an advocate.
No.
So,
and anytime they do have an advocate, they shut it down.
For sure.
No, you can't unionize players. And you just hit it. You just hit it. Every decision that's been made is to chase money. That's what businesses do.
It's not even that. It's to protect them who have the money,
which is what businesses do,
from sharing it with the people who are helping them generate it.
So the schools are trying to get, Congress to intervene so that the players can't get any cut of this.
That was their idea of leadership, by the way.
Yes. It's like, no, not that.
We need help
to keep our money.
Right.
So if every action you take is run like a business, again, all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure every time you try to go to court. Every one of your actions. Let's say you get back to another judge and they're deciding, they're like, okay, so you're not a business, yet every single one of your moves has been driven by business. So what are we getting at here? They keep just shooting themselves in the foot when they've had every opportunity to correct.
They're the Washington Generals every time they get to a court.
Whew.
And the judges are the Harlem
It's
Globetrotters.
rough, man.